Good afternoon and welcome to this month's Chamber One-on-One. My name is Brian Freedman. I'm the chair of the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee. First, I'd like to start out with a big thanks to our sponsor, CenterPoint Energy, for sponsoring this series and appreciate their generous support. I'd like to introduce our speaker today and colleague today, Glenn Hammer, the president and CEO of the Texas Association of Business, which is our statewide chamber of commerce. Glenn comes to TAB after 14 years as the CEO of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, where he led the state's business community in numerous public policy victories. He played a central role in major tax, education, legal, and healthcare victories and was a nationwide leader in the business community's advocacy for the USMCA. Prior to the chamber, he served as chief of staff to Arizona Congressman Matt Salmon, executive director of the Arizona Republican Party, legislative assistant to Senator John Kyle, and executive director of the Solar Energy Industry Association. He's a graduate of Cornell University and Arizona State University's College of Law, and serves on the board of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and chairs its Committee of 100, the group of top 100 chambers in the country. It's an honor to have with us, and please help me welcome Glenn Hammer. Glenn, great to see you.
Great to see you, and it's an honor to be on the program with you. Thank you for the kind introduction.
Absolutely. An honor to have you with us. Hey, why don't we kick it off with an easy one? If you could take a couple minutes and just walk us through your journey to the state of Texas and where you've been and how you got here.
Well, first, I'm going to say that I'm really blessed to be here. I think my tourism visa for Texas just expired. I arrived here March 1st. If you asked me about a year ago, do I think there would be a better chance for me to be heading to Mars or coming anywhere to Texas or to any other state, I'd say I'm probably going to space, because that's something I've always wanted to do. And I know for Boeing and a lot of other companies, that's a pretty important thing to mention. But you know what happened is that I had a great experience in Arizona, learned through a friend that one of the great jobs in Chamberville, the Texas Association of Business, was open, and just felt in my heart of hearts it was the right thing to go for it. And it was very, very fortunate that I've had the chance to come here. And I'm going to butcher this cliche, Brian, so I apologize, but I do believe the statement is, if you weren't born in Texas, you do everything possible to get here as fast as you can. And this is where I hope to stay for, until I maybe go to Mars.
Hey, well, we're working hard on that. So I will add your name to the list of interested astronaut candidates and see what we can do there. But hey, you're right. The Texas Association of Business is a big organization, a very prominent one. I know it as the statewide chamber, but y'all do a lot of stuff on advocacy, but then a whole host of other business issues that are important for the business community and the broader state in general. Can you talk a little bit, about what sort of, from your view, the Texas Association of Business excels at, and then maybe help us with you've seen other states and how they do it, maybe a little compare and contrast with Arizona and other states.
Yeah, it's a great question. What state chamber should do, and having run the Arizona State Chamber, I've had the privilege to meet my chamber brothers and sisters from across the country in all sorts of red, blue, purple states. What great state chambers do is they advocate. They focus on advocacy, and they work with chambers throughout the state to promote a pro-business climate. And that means working primarily at the state legislature to pass positive legislation and to block bad legislation. I would say in today's world, it's more and more important to also participate on the federal level, because so many state and even local policies, there's some sort of federal connection. You think transportation, think healthcare, as two obvious ones, and even think of how federal tax policy influences investment in the state. So one of the reasons I was so excited to come to Texas is that there is the best collection of, and the most active collection of chamber CEOs that I think exists in any state. And I just want to say that, from day one, very, very fortunate to have Cindy on our board and very active with the Texas Chamber of Commerce executives, which Aaron Cox, who's in our office, does a great job of serving as the executive director of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll echo the great team at TAB, and Aaron in particular have just been fantastic to work with. So thank you for that. So you mentioned you started in March, and I was going to ask you just to kind of give a little looking back. You're a little past your first 100 days, but not too far past it. How's it been going? What do you think some of the big accomplishments have been? And then looking, shifting that view a little bit forward, what's the next big hill to climb?
Well, Brian, first I have to say I was misinformed, because Texas is not a state, it's a country. This is a big place. And that's, so one of, just on a 30,000 foot level, is the size and scope of Texas. For comparison's sakes, it's 5 times the GDP of Arizona and 4 times or so the population. So it's a big place. The other thing on a personal note that I think is really important is that how good and welcoming the people of Texas are from across this great state, and how rooted they are. I am shocked every day I meet someone whose family's been in this state 3, 4, 5, 6 generations. You just really don't hear that anywhere else. And in fact, I read somewhere that Texas is the stickiest state, meaning people, once they come here, it's the least likely state in the country where people are going to leave. And I understand that, because it is just, on a human level, a great place to live. In terms of what Texas Association of Business, what we've been able to accomplish in March, I'll first say that everything that we've done has been because we've had great participation across the chamber community, period. 2 or 3 big items that benefit all of us. And the sweet spot for any state chamber is finding those issues that benefit all industries, all parts of the state, all sizes of business. I'll give 3 quick examples. We played an important role in helping to get COVID-19 liability protection through. This is legislation that benefits healthcare systems, healthcare workers, small businesses, schools, colleges, businesses, nonprofits, you name it, religious institutions. That was important. We got a very good bill through with very strong bipartisan support. Texans for Lawsuit Reform, TLR, does a great job of making sure that Texas has the country's best environment for civil justice. With their leadership, we played a supporting role with the help of chambers across the state of Texas to make sure that abusive trucking lawsuits were curbed. Again, another big bipartisan victory that's very important for the state's business environment. And particularly for a state like Texas that transports so much goods through us because we are the country's largest exporting state. And the third thing I would just quickly mention, broadband. We worked together as part of a coalition for the state to set up a broadband office and then to develop a broadband plan. We've learned in the pandemic how important good communications are. And as a result of our collective efforts in 3 very important areas, we've improved the state's business environment. We were number 1 before. We're even more entrenched as number 1 because of these important policy victories.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And those are state legislative items, and I'd like to kind of transition to talking a little bit more about the state legislature. In particular, we're now in the 3rd special session, I think just over right at 10 days in. And so redistricting is an issue, but there are a number of other issues. Can you talk a little bit about redistricting and what's happening and how that process works? And then B, what other issues y'all are watching and advocating for, or what the other things are that you're keeping an eye on?
Right. We're in the 3rd special session. So even though I came from a state where the legislature met every other year, usually for met every year, usually for about 120 or 130 days, to here it meets every other year. But it does allow for special sessions. So we're actually in the 3rd special session with the focus on redistricting. The state house maps just came out. So literally an hour or 2 ago. So we're evaluating that. The state Senate maps, for certain districts, there could be some fairly significant changes, but I wouldn't anticipate that there's going to be a dramatic change in the balance of power if everything holds. And these maps, generally speaking, get challenged in court. So we're going to have to see how that process plays out. In terms of congressionally, I think this is important. Texas was the only state in the country to gain 2 seats. So the congressional delegation goes from 36 to 38. The maps are basically designed in a way that I don't think you're going to see a dramatic change in the partisan breakdown. They seem to be designed in a way that would be fairly incumbent friendly on both sides of the aisle. So right now, the way the maps on the congressional side are designed, I don't think you'll see much of a change. It's not like what's going on in some other states, like my birth state of New York, where they're really trying to gain for partisan advantage 4 or 5 new seats on the Democratic side. Our top priority item, our focus right now at the Texas Association of Business is seeing to the replenishment of the state's unemployment insurance trust fund. This legislature passed and the governor signed an important bill during the regular session to make sure we wouldn't see any immediate tax increases based on a $7 billion or so shortfall in the UI trust fund, in large part because of the state's very good economic performance, as well as some significant federal dollars flowing into the state. We have the opportunity this special session to replenish the unemployment trust fund. And Senator Nelson has introduced a bill that would provide about $7 or $7.2 billion to do just that. I'd say that's our top priority item for this special session, because that's the type of thing that benefits all companies across the state, small, medium, and large, and would protect against what could be a significant tax increase down the road. There are some other things that, as the conversation goes on, that are unfinished business that we could talk about. But right now, our focus is on getting the highest possible dollar number in terms of replenishing our state's unemployment trust fund through the legislature and to the governor's desk.
Absolutely. Thank you. The one thing I did want to check, it looked like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it looked like with the Senate drafted congressional maps that, for, there's nuance to this, but that generally Houston and Austin looked like they picked up those seats. Is that accurate?
That's my understanding. And when you look at it, the Houston area and the Austin area are two of the, and the Dallas metro area is also growing very rapidly. So we have 3 major areas of this state that are growing faster than almost all other areas of the country. But that's correct. It looks like those are the 2 areas where the 2 new seats will be drawn.
Great. And for those keeping score at home, that would make us go to 38 House seats for Texas, up from 36. So
second only to California.
Indeed. And we're coming. We keep growing, and they keep moving.
We pick up 2. California loses 1. So,
hey, one of the things that we've been watching pretty closely is economic development incentives. People are all over the map on how they feel about them, but there's no denying that they've been an effective tool for getting businesses to come to the state of Texas. Chapter 313 was a big deal, but there are others and others on the horizon. For the folks watching, can you explain a little bit about what just Chapter 313 is, and then generally kind of how you're feeling about the climate for economic development incentives and incentives in general?
Well, that's a great question, and this is really an important one, and I appreciate you bringing up Chapter 313, because here's the deal. Texas has won 9 straight governor's cups from Site Selection magazine. That means we've been the best state for economic development projects for 9 straight years. That's astonishing. 17 straight years, CEOs have ranked Texas as the top state in the country to do business. There's a lot of other recognitions and rankings along those lines. And again, the fact that we picked up 2 congressional seats, no other state picked up 1. We're the freest country on the planet, and people are voluntarily moving to Texas, including chamber executives from other states, from great other states. I think we're going to have to really redouble our efforts when it comes to explaining the value of some of these economic development incentives. It's fantastic. I appreciate it personally that Texas doesn't have a personal income tax. I love it. It's a great feature of the state. But what has happened is that property taxes here can get pretty high, both on residential and for businesses. For capital intensive projects, there simply needs to be tools in the toolbox so that we can continue to attract these big 100, 200 million, and sometimes multi-billion-dollar projects, particularly in these areas: space, aerospace, auto sector, chemicals, these different areas where these projects have just a huge price tag, incredibly important. So right now, there was a great effort that came up short to extend the Chapter 313 incentive. There's an effort right now as we speak in the legislature. Representative Huberty is trying to get a 1-year extension so that the 313 doesn't fall away in December 2022. We're going to see what we can do with that effort. But what we do know is we're going to have to reform Chapter 313 to get a permanent replacement in place. And there is going to need to be a permanent replacement. It would take a while to talk through all of the issues, but that incentive 313 has been hit by the right and the left. What we're going to have to do, chamber by chamber, is build the case for an economic development tool that will continue to keep Texas as the top spot. The stakes are really high. They're really high. And I'm just going to take a quick diversion here a little bit. The reason why Texas has this tool in the first place, in part, is because of the state I just came from, Arizona. Arizona lost a major project. It was being built in the Dallas area. It was an Intel project. It wound up in Arizona. $50 billion worth of planned investment later. Arizona's done okay with that. Other states have tools, including Arizona, when it comes to big ticket investment projects. We need something in the state of Texas, but it's going to take some time to design a permanent replacement for Chapter 313, and it's going to need to be all hands on deck. And I just want to say my final comment on this. Wherever I go in this great state of Texas, and I have the privilege to speak virtually or in person before a Chamber of Commerce, this comes up as a very important tool that needs to remain in some form in effect. And we're gonna do everything we possibly can to see that occurs, and Texas remains the best state in the country to do business.
Thank you, and fantastic, and agreed. Well, very well said in his description of the issue. Want to shift gears?
I don't mind Arizona getting some products, but they can't. We need to win the lion's share.
Indeed. Hey, I want to shift gears to federal issues and see what you're keeping an eye on there. Certainly a very big week in DC this week, but every week. What are you keeping an eye on? What should we be watching, and any big issues that we should keep on our radar?
Well, for the viewers, I just want to first call out Congressman Kevin Brady. He belongs in the Congressional Hall of Fame. We should start one. I'm talking nationally. This is one of the most important public officials to ever serve in the state of Texas. He was the prime author of the 2017 tax bill. Yeah, that's the tax bill that buried the word inversion. We haven't lost a single company in the United States since that bill passed. That's a big policy victory. We've seen wages increase at record highs. That has a large part to do with that tax bill. Right now, we're in defense. We are in complete defense mode. You have a $3.5 trillion reconciliation package that is the worst serious budget bill ever seriously considered by the United States Congress. It would raise virtually every tax. It would double the tax on investment and profits earned abroad to a very uncompetitive level. It would raise our corporate income tax from 21%, which now is very competitive, to 26.5%, which would put us at the back of the pack again, ahead of China, by the way, which has a 25% corporate income tax. Does anyone really think that that's a good idea for U.S. competitiveness to do this? It jacks up tax rates on small businesses in all sorts of ways, whether it's carried interest or raising the rack rate of the highest individual income tax rate, which a lot of the companies probably watching this program pay. That hits a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. So what are we doing? We are working with the National Association of Manufacturers. We are very connected with the U.S. Chamber to rally our federal officials to vote against and to block any sort of reconciliation package that destroys the tax competitiveness of this country. And I would say for the viewers here, this is another important point. It not only jacks up our tax rates, but puts in very radical, unobtainable energy mandates that would really harm the Houston area. I think everyone sees that, and I would say that all the major energy companies agree they want to become less carbon intensive. They're, through carbon sequestration or more efficiency or what have you. We support that. And I think you mentioned in a past life, I ran the Solar Energy Industries Association. Love renewables. A lot of great wind in Texas as well. But you have to do it in a practical, reasonable way that doesn't destroy the economy of the state and the country. And let me just close this statement by adding, when you have the administration saying, hey, dear OPEC, could you pump more? Hey, we have a lot of energy production in the great state of Texas and in the United States of America. Let's control things domestically. So right now, our number one thing is we need to make sure that that $3.5 trillion spending bill doesn't move forward. We have 7 Texas Democratic members of Congress that have written a letter to Speaker Pelosi, and kudos to these 7 elected members of Congress for saying the energy provisions are essentially a no-go. And I also just want to point out 2 great senators, Senator Manchin of West Virginia and Senator Kyrsten Sinema, the senior senator in Arizona, for their courage in standing up against the $3.5 trillion spending freight train that would really damage the United States of America in a permanent way. And final comment, I mentioned Congressman Brady, who has led the charge for the 2017 tax law. He was the chair of the Ways and Means Committee when that was enacted. He is now leading the charge in Congress to fight the reconciliation package that would blow up much of that package. And we stand ready to help him however we can.
Yeah. And if memory serves correct, I think Congressman Brady was a chamber executive at one point. So
19 years. He's one of the best. And I would say on the positive side, there is a $1.2 trillion transportation infrastructure bill. A bipartisan bill that has a lot of support. Not perfect, what legislation is, but that's the type of measure that our United States Congress should be passing. One that has had thoughtful deliberation, that has true bipartisan support, and that you can demonstrate a return on investment. Not a $3.5 trillion wish list that would distort and perhaps undermine the free market system that has brought so much prosperity to the state of Texas and to the United States of America.
Hey, I kind of a walk-on one, although you mentioned a little bit earlier about supply chain issues. How do you feel about sort of the supply chain challenges that are happening right now, this kind of rubber banding of raw materials and everything from lumber to semiconductors and everything in between, kind of these accelerated prices, and then suddenly they collapse again and moving around. What's your read, and what do you think we should be doing, and how do we work our way out of this?
Well, I want to also give a lot of credit to Senator John Cornyn. This is a phenomenal United States senator. He's been working on issues related to semiconductors and chips. And you think about all the different technological things that we're talking about, whether it's cars or spaceships or airplanes or anything, it boils down to chips. And he has been working really hard in a bipartisan way, to make sure that we get we restore and improve our chip production in the United States of America. And let's focus on Texas, because we have we are leading the country in that area. You know, it's a great question. I think there's a lot of different components to that. Our Chamber of Commerce, and we would love to work with you, Brian, and Cindy on this. We have an EDA grant, and that Senator Cornyn actually sent out a press release a few months ago to work in the state of Texas on supply chain issues. It's very clear that we need to become more self-sufficient. We love trade. You mentioned USMCA. We love trade. We love to see deals with the UK and Europe, and you know, some point getting back into a TPP type situation. But we are going to have to become more reliant. And as I said, you know, Texas really is a country, and there's a lot more we can do in terms of supply chains here. It's not a simple question. I wish I could give a little bit of a better answer. But my only final point I would say is let's not do any harm. You know, some of the policies that we fought against, for example, we felt strongly that the $300 federal supplement should be rescinded, not because we're mean-hearted, but because the jobs were open. And part of the issue was that you had a $300 basically incentive not to work that was limiting the ability of companies to fill these positions that we need to keep oil, gas, supermarket supplies, chips, you name it, going. And, you know, so we have to be careful that when we're talking about some of these social programs, that we don't do things that keep people out of the workforce and exacerbate what's already a huge issue, which is a supply chain disruption that's not only felt in Texas and the United States, but right now it's around the globe.
Thank you. The penultimate question, and I ask this of everybody who comes on and is gracious to spend their time with us. The TAB is a really important organization. We've talked about why that is, but just for members who aren't familiar with TAB, can you talk about why it's so important that you guys are in Austin and talking about these issues and working these items?
Yeah, well, because Texas is the center of the universe when it comes to the free market system, and we have to keep Texas strong. And what we do is we work at the state capitol and in Washington, D.C. to make sure that the free market system and what has made Texas a spectacular success continues. And I hate saying it, but there's really two operating systems in the United States. It's Texas and California. And Texas needs to win to keep the U.S. on top. So our goal and our role is every chance we get is to improve the country, and I would argue the world's greatest business environment here in the state of Texas. So our website is www.txbiz.org. We would love for people and companies and chambers to join us so we can continue this noble what we think is this noble fight. And a couple things I didn't mention, you know, that we did work on, PPP loan forgiveness, which Governor Abbott signed, and we had the chance to be at his bill signing. That was really important for a lot of small and medium enterprise businesses, so they didn't get nailed with the franchise tax. Margaritas to go, you know, so modernize our regulatory system so that we can come out of this pandemic stronger. So I couldn't be more bullish on the state of Texas. We've got great leaders here. We've got great chambers, and you know, we appreciate the support, whether it's with our chamber or with your chamber. We're all in this together.
Awesome. Well, I committed to you that I wouldn't ask any too hard questions, but I'm gonna withdraw that commitment to ask you this one. You're now a Texan. What's your favorite barbecue place you've been to?
Ooh, that's a tough one. If I have to answer it, I'm going to answer it. I love Lambert's.
Okay.
I think there's sometimes here in Austin, there's sometimes live music. It's very tender brisket, but I have only had fantastic barbecue in the state of Texas. So I've had a tremendous amount since I've been here. So I look forward to your suggestion when we have a chance to visit in person.
I can't wait, and we'll be looking forward to it. Hey, a huge thank you to TAB CEO Glenn Hammer. We need to go ahead and close out. We are 12:30 on the dot, but just a few quick updates. We have some upcoming events. The Chamber's annual banquet is tomorrow evening, and look forward to seeing everybody there. Unfortunately, all the tickets are sold out for that. Next week, the Young Professionals Lunch Bunch will be on October 6th. We have a business after hours at Opus Bistro on the 13th, and many other events and ribbon cuttings. Please check the Chamber's website, where you'll also be able to find this interview and many others. Again, a big thank you to our sponsor, CenterPoint Energy, and thank you again to Texas Association of Business CEO Glenn Hammer. Appreciate everybody being here, and have a great afternoon.